The lake glistened like polished glass, untouched and still. As I eased my houseboat into Willow Creek Cove, a mist hung low on the water, veiling the morning sun, and for a brief, perfect moment, it felt like I'd found the quiet I'd been chasing for years. After 3 decades in the Navy, I didn't want noise. I didn't want neighbors, lawns, fences, or drama. I wanted water, solitude, a slow life. So I built my own floating retreat, solar panels, rain catchers, satellite uplink, and reinforced pontoons. I could live completely off-grid, and I chose this lake for a reason. It was tucked away, mostly undeveloped, and according to the county, not under any HOA jurisdiction. Or so I believed. I was still tightening ropes on the dock when I heard the unmistakable clatter of cheap heels against wood. A voice followed a sharp, clipped tone that carried authority it hadn't earned. "You can't anchor that thing here." I turned. She stood like a suburban sentinel at the edge of the pier, mid-50s, platinum blonde bob that hadn't moved since 1998, and a pastel pink windbreaker zipped to the neck. She held a clipboard like it was an arrest warrant. "You're on HOA property," she said, tapping her pen against the board. "Willow Creek Lakeside Association doesn't allow unregistered vessels to dock." I raised an eyebrow. "This is public lakefront." Her eyes narrowed. "It's HOA-maintained shoreline," and that she waved a hand at my houseboat. And I extended a hand. "Name's Cole Harris. Retired Navy commander. Just moved here last week." She ignored the gesture. "Karen Pritchard, HOA president. And this is a violation." She handed me a paper already filled out in neat, aggressive handwriting. "Notice of violation. Unauthorized vessel." I looked down at the note, then up at her. "I'm not parked on anyone's land. I'm anchored 15 feet from the shore." "Doesn't matter," she snapped. "You're within view. That makes you part of the neighborhood." I blinked. "Is that an actual rule?" Karen straightened her back. "It's common sense." That was the moment I knew Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was the kind of person who mistook power for purpose. Someone who turned a clipboard into a throne. Still, I wasn't here to start fights. I'd lived through worse than a cranky HOA president, so I nodded, smiled, and said, "I'll look into it." But Karen didn't want cooperation. She wanted control. By sundown, I found laminated warning signs staked in the sand near my dock. "Private property. No mooring. Violators will be fined." 3 of them, planted like flags in hostile territory. The next morning, she returned with reinforcements to other board members, both in tucked-in polos and matching frowns. "This is a peaceful community," one of them said. "People pay good money to live here." "I'm not bothering anyone," I replied, sipping coffee from my thermos. "Just floating, fishing, minding my business." Karen cut in. "You're not registered with the HOA. That's a problem." "I'm not part of the You're in view of it," she said again, like that phrase had legal weight. I didn't argue. I just pointed to the lake behind me. "That's public water. You want to control it, you'll have to buy it." Her eyes flickered just for a second. It told me everything. She hadn't thought about who owned the lake. She just assumed it was hers to command. That assumption would become her downfall back on my boat. I pulled out a manila folder, the deed to the property I'd quietly acquired months ago through a limited liability company. What no one in Willow Creek knew, including Karen, was that the lake they cherished so dearly, the very water they were now trying to evict me from, was no longer county-owned. That belonged to me. But I wasn't ready to reveal that card. Yet let her think she was winning. Let her escalate. I wanted peace. She wanted war, and soon she'd get one. The following week turned into a theater of hostility. Karen didn't back down. She doubled down. Every morning I'd step out onto my deck with a fresh mug of coffee, and there she'd be standing at the edge of the dock with her clipboard and binoculars, jotting down notes like a wildlife researcher observing an invasive species. Except in her mind, I wasn't part of nature. I was a threat. By midweek, she'd filed 6 formal complaints with the county. I knew because I called the clerk's office to ask. They were amused. None of them held water, pun intended. I wasn't tethered to HOA land. I wasn't causing noise. My emissions were 0. My home met every state and federal requirement for a liveaboard vessel. But legal futility wasn't going to stop Karen. She wasn't after compliance. She was after control. Thursday morning, I awoke to the rhythmic chug of an engine. I climbed out to find a patrol boat circling my hull. On board were 2 men in tactical windbreakers, dark shades, and grim expressions. "Sir, we've received reports of unauthorized residential activity," one of them said. I handed them my paperwork without a word. Registration, water rights, environmental compliance. 10 minutes later, they left with a sheepish nod. Karen watched it all from the pier with a sour expression, arms folded across her chest. I waved. That night it escalated. I was jolted awake by a loud metallic clang against the hull. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out barefoot. A motorized toy boat painted with the HOA logo circled my houseboat. Erratically strapped to its deck was a speaker, blaring a recording of Karen's voice repeating, "This is a violation. Vacate immediately. This is a violation." I watched in disbelief, then calmly scooped it out of the water with a net and dismantled it. She wasn't just stubborn, she was obsessive. The next morning I visited town and bought a small security camera setup. By dusk, I had motion sensors trained on the waterline and a live stream feed running to my laptop. Then came the nail in the coffin. Saturday evening, just after sundown, I returned from fishing to find my houseboat listing to the side. One of the pontoons had been slashed deep, deliberate cuts carved straight through the flotation drum. Water gushed in like a ruptured artery. I ran below deck cursing, trying to seal the leak, but the damage was done. My home was sinking. I called the sheriff. 2 deputies arrived within the hour. I showed them the security footage. Sure enough, at 2:18 a.m., a shadowy figure in a black wetsuit had waded out from Karen's side of the cove and sabotaged my boat with a diving knife. I couldn't see a face, but I saw the gait, the height, the tight bun of hair as she retreated under the moonlight. Karen hadn't just declared war. She'd fired the first shot. "You want to press charges?" one of the deputies asked. "Absolutely," I said. They nodded and collected the footage. As they left, I stared out across the dark water. Karen's porch light blinked off. She knew what she'd done, and for a moment, I could almost respect the audacity. But she'd made one colossal mistake. She'd attacked me on my lake, and now, it was time she learned who really held the reins. I logged into my company's online dashboard, Willow Creek Holdings LLC. 3 months ago, I'd quietly bought the lake from the county for a sum most people wouldn't believe. They'd offloaded it, eager to hand over the maintenance liability. To them, it was just a body of water. To me, it was the perfect shield and sword, Karen thought. I was some drifter. She didn't know she was trespassing on my property every time she so much as dipped a toe in the lake, and come Monday morning, I'd remind her and the entire HO exactly who they were dealing with. By Monday morning, the air buzzed with tension. At 8 a.m., sharp, a sleek black SUV rolled into the Willow Creek HOA office parking lot. Out stepped my attorney, Lena Morales, sharp as a blade in a navy suit, briefcase in hand, and a "don't waste my energy" that could slice through granite. Karen was already there, pacing on the sidewalk like a general awaiting battle. "You again," she sneered as Lena walked past. Lena didn't flinch. "We're not here to play, Miss Pritchard. We're here to deliver formal notice." By 9 a.m. certified letters were delivered to every homeowner along the lake's edge. The header read, "Greater than notice of property transfer and new lake usage regulations, immediately. Willow Creek Lake is now privately owned by Willow Creek Holdings LLC. Any docks, water access structures, or recreational usage of the lake must be registered with the new owner. All unauthorized fixtures are subject to removal and daily penalty fees." Which from my rebuilt deck, still a bit crooked from the sabotages, the neighborhood unraveled. People trickled out of their homes, reading the notice aloud in disbelief. "What, do you mean the lake's privately owned? I thought the HOA controlled it. This can't be legal, can it?" The best part, it was Karen stormed down the pier, red-faced and trembling. She shouted toward my boat, her voice cracking like brittle glass, "You can't do this. You can't just take over the lake." I stood calmly at the railing. "I didn't take it. I bought it legally. It was listed publicly by the county. You missed the memo. You're extorting this community." "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting what's mine. Something you should understand." Later that afternoon, the HOA held a crisis meeting under the gazebo. I live-streamed the whole thing from a drone hovering nearby. Karen stood at the center, gesturing wildly as she tried to rally support. "We can fight this," she barked. "There are legal options. We can petition the county." One man stood and held up the letter. "This says the sale's finalized. And honestly, I'm not mad at him. I'm mad at you. You pushed this too far." Others nodded. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen's vice president, a tired-looking man named Dennis, stepped up to the mic. "Maybe if we hadn't gone after him so hard, he wouldn't have retaliated." Karen's jaw dropped. "Retaliated? He sabotaged us." "No," Dennis said, locking eyes with her. "You started this. You sank his houseboat." The crowd fell silent. Karen's face flushed a deep, humiliating crimson. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She had finally lost the room. By Tuesday, 10 households had already signed license agreements with my company. Simple contracts that allowed continued use of the lake in exchange for a $1 annual fee in acknowledgement of property boundaries. I waived the fee, of course. I wasn't in this for the money. I was in it for the principle. Karen, however, refused to sign instead. She filed a public nuisance complaint against me and attempted to sue for emotional distress. My attorney laughed it out of court within days. The final blow came that Friday. I threw a Lake Freedom Festival. Food trucks lined the shore. Kids splashed in rented paddle boats. Live music echoed across the cove. I even brought in a floating movie screen and played Jaws at sunset. Just for the irony, HOA members, once divided, mingled like old friends. Many came up to thank me. A few apologized for Karen. She stood at her window, seething behind curtains, arms crossed like a statue of vengeance. And then, around 9:30 p.m., her porch lights exploded in a flicker of red and blue. The sheriff had arrived. Apparently, a fit of fury, Karen had screamed at a group of festival-goers walking across her lawn, thrown a glass bottle at a canoe, and then shoved a deputy when he intervened. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she was handcuffed and led to the squad car. My camera was already rolling. The video, titled HOA President Goes Berserk at Lake Festival Arrested on Her Own Lawn, it hit 2 million views. By Sunday, Karen's empire was crumbling, and I hadn't even dropped the final anchor yet. Karen was released the next day with a court summons and a bruised ego, but something had shifted. The neighborhood that once bent to her will now kept their distance. The power she clung to had slipped through her manicured fingers, replaced by whispers, eye rolls, and late-night jokes over backyard grills. Still, she didn't give up entirely. That wasn't Karen's way. She tried to run for HOA president again despite the legal scandal. She claimed she was a victim of targeted harassment and accused me of manipulating the neighborhood with corporate tactics. But when the ballots came in, the numbers told the truth. She received 2 votes her own and 1 from a confused retiree who marked the wrong box. The new president, a mild-mannered software engineer named Rob, reached out within the first week. "I just want things to be peaceful," he said during our meeting on the dock. "No more drama. No more lawsuits. If you're willing, I'd like to officially recognize Willow Creek Holdings as our lake partner and work together." I shook his hand without hesitation. Peace was all I ever wanted. In the weeks that followed, the lake transformed. My once isolated houseboat became a floating clubhouse of sorts. I installed a small lending library on the dock. Kids fished from the edge of the water, and elderly couples waved from paddleboards. I started offering free boating safety lessons every Saturday. People no longer looked at me like a stranger, they looked at me like a neighbor. Even those who had initially sided with Karen eventually came around. Mrs. Talbot, who once filed a complaint because my wind chimes were too nautical, brought over a homemade blueberry pie. Another man, Craig, offered to help repaint the trim on my deck, but Karen, she spiraled. Her house, once pristine with flawless hedges and precisely spaced garden gnomes, fell into disrepair. Dead leaves collected on her porch. Her once daily HOA patrols ceased entirely. Some said she was trying to sell, others claimed she stayed inside all day, curtains drawn, watching the lake like it had betrayed her. Then, one crisp fall morning, a moving truck pulled into her driveway. She was gone by noon. No farewell, no apology, no second act, just gone. I watched from the deck of my houseboat as the truck disappeared down the road, her pink windbreaker barely visible in the passenger seat. For a moment, I felt something like pity. Then I turned back to the lake, the breeze crisp against my skin, and took a slow breath. That chapter was closed. A few months later, I hosted the first annual Lake Unity picnic, a joint effort between the HOA and Willow Creek Holdings. We had barbecues, canoe races, even a live folk band on a floating stage. Kids built sandcastles on the shore. Old folks danced barefoot in the grass dotted the edge of it all. I stood next to Rob and sipped sweet tea. "You know," he said, "I was scared when I heard you owned the lake. Figured you'd squeeze us dry." I laughed. "Nah, I just wanted to float in peace. She brought the storm." "Well," he said, raising his glass, "thanks for bringing the calm after." Later that night, I uploaded one final video to my channel. The thumbnail showed the lake at sunset, golden light spilling over the ripples like spilled treasure. The title read, "They tried to sink me, now I own the lake." It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about the lesson that when you stand your ground, stay calm under pressure, and let truth float to the surface, the storm always passes and leaves behind still water. I looked out across my lake, now echoing with laughter instead of arguments, and smiled, because this wasn't just my home anymore, it was my legacy.